Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us today. I really appreciate everyone taking time out of their busy lives to join us on this very, very important discussion that we're about to have. As you saw in the news clipping that we just shared, Valerie has gone through just the most horrific and traumatic things, and I am so happy to see the person that she is today and all the obstacles that she has overcome. The person that she has become today is someone who hopes to inspire others who are in certain situations that were similar to hers. And oops, sorry, that is my phone. Let me actually turn that off so we don't get distracted. And just a trigger warning again, there are going to be a lot of graphic images that we are going to be sharing as part of this stream. So if there are certain things that trigger you, please be mindful of that. And without further ado, please help me welcome the absolutely wonderful and lovely Valerie. Hi, Valerie, you're live.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me, Raven.
Thank you for taking time out of your very busy life and your awesome new job.
Thank you.
Yay! I'm so guys. I have a inside scoop because I got to speak to Valerie behind the scenes, so I know all about the amazing things that she's been through in her life and like that have led up to her landing her dream job. But I will leave it to her to explain and talk about it more. Brandon says hi, by the way, and Preston is here as well in chat. So hello, everyone. Thank you, Valerie, once again for speaking on this very important issue. And I know it's not an easy topic, but again, we are talking about domestic violence. So before we dive into, your experience with domestic violence, I think it's important to just identify what domestic violence is. So I searched up what the dictionary definition of it is, and it says that it's a violent or aggressive behavior in the home, typically involving the violent abuse of a spouse or partner. Would you say that's a fair representation of what domestic violence is to you, or do you feel like there's an element that's missing in that definition?
I think it negates that it isn't just always physical violence. In the end of the day, it's some sort of human being that does not accept boundaries for the other human being, that makes them feel subhuman or not worth anything. Because once you start losing your identity in a partner, in a friend, and whoever you're engaging, then I think that qualifies as the beginning of domestic violence.
That's actually really, really important to know, and I'm really glad that you mentioned that. I know the definition says violent or aggressive behavior, but as you said, it doesn't always start off as violent. It doesn't always start off as aggressive behavior. It's just off. Like I
Yeah.
remember in the video when you were saying you're like he was acting off. So that doesn't mean right off the bat he started, battering you. But I think that's a really important element. So thank you for pointing that out. What do you think is one of the most common misconceptions of domestic violence? Would it be that, like what you just said, that it's only physical?
Yes, I think so. Like I said, there's so many different forms of abuse. I mean, and mental and emotional abuse obviously can have just as bad of repercussions for the victim as a physical abuse can. And maybe even long standing, because sometimes you can heal from a wound a lot quicker than you can heal from the emotional damage caused from some form of trauma and
Yes.
repeated trauma. It's like narcissistic abuse. A lot of people that have been through narcissistic relationships, even though there wasn't a physical element there, end up having to go through therapy for years because they're taught that they're not worth anything. Then they feel like because they're not worth anything, they attract more people that also are damaged because hurt people will hurt people.
Yeah. And I think eventually, like, there's only so much fight that you can do. Eventually, you start to internalize that and you start to believe those things to be true.
Hmm.
And their word is bond, basically. It's horrible. And I'm really glad that you made that distinction that sometimes you can have the physical violence and you can heal from those, but the emotional damage and the trauma that leaves behind takes many more years to recover from. So visibly you might be okay, but internally you're so damaged and bleeding and battered and bruised still.
Mm-hmm.
Preston says you're such a strong woman, Val. I agree. I
Thank you.
agree. I said the same thing. So in your experience, actually, if you don't mind, can we just start right from the beginning? Like, what happened? What happened?
Well, one of the misconceptions that wasn't put on the news, because anybody tries to do a news interview or whatever, they obviously go and edit
Clip,
whatever
yeah, right.
just to fit it into their time slots, which is
Mm-hmm.
normal, you know. But a lot of it is like they're under the preconceived notion that me and John were actually together at the time that happened. That was not true.
Stop.
And
What? Oh my God. Okay, yeah, see? No, it looks like you guys were in a relationship and then it happened.
we were previously, but we weren't at the time when it occurred,
Okay.
because had already been one thing that I want to kind of stress with people is there had already been situations where he had like disregarded my feelings, and at that point, like I was, you know, like, hey, we were friends since we were kids. We can stay friends, but I think relationship wise, we're just not compatible. Left it at that. And there was a situation where his kids were dropped on him where he had just got a job and he had barely had any money and they only had toothbrushes and stuff, and at that time COVID had happened and he didn't have a place to go with these two children, and being a parent myself, I just couldn't see these kids going without, because
Right.
at one point John was one of my closest friends in high school.
Right.
So I invited them to come stay with me because I had a big house. I had a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath house. There was plenty of room for everybody, and
Mm-hmm.
COVID was happening, and I was a single mom. So I was like, you know, it's better than being alone by myself with chaos everywhere, you know, because
Yeah.
nobody knew how bad it was going to be. All we knew is we was going in the grocery store, and hey, nothing was on the shelves, you know,
Yeah.
and people were fighting over toilet paper, you know.
And you have a little one yourself, Ronan, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So
Um,
at this time, how old like the picture looks, he's a baby, like he's a little one, little one.
yeah, he was 2.
Oh my God. So he's 2, you're living in this 4-bedroom house. You invite John and his 2 children to stay with you.
Yes.
Okay.
And at the time, because me and John had been in and out of each other's lives for a while
Right.
because of the fact that our friendship, he lived in another state, I lived in Ohio, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
That I wasn't like completely in on his lifestyle or anything like that. I just knew we can maintain communication. Didn't seem any weird but then come to find out he was on methamphetamine. Did not know
So I think there
till
was an
everything
element of
broke loose.
trust, it seems. Like there was an already, like he wouldn't accept coming to my place around my child if he was doing anything shady. So like
Hmm.
it sounds like you were just like open arms, like for sure I can help out a friend because you're trusting him.
Yeah, by nature.
Yeah.
um, and then which leads to like all the emotional damage later that obviously we can talk about, because there's that level of guilt that a parent feels when you're like, oh, there's a monster in my house, I allowed a monster around my child, you know,
Right.
like. But in the same respect, later on as I healed, I started to learn like, if it because of the way he choked his own son, he was going to kill his own kids and stuff. Had it happened any other way, his kids probably wouldn't have been there, and maybe that was the reason for everything. Because I too think that no matter what we go through in our lives, that there's something positive we can derive from it.
Mm-hmm.
And if it was nothing else than that they can grow up without somebody abusing them, and because he'll be in prison till they get, grown, then so be it, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And actually, I'll go. I'll talk about this later, but it's you even got to the point where you accepted the trauma as something that helped you grow and something that you were thankful for. So I do want to get
Yeah.
into that later because I think that that's something so that to me shows a lot of strength and resilience, because it's very rare that you will go through something like that and be like, you know what, I'm glad it happened. Sure, in that situation I wasn't glad, but like in retrospect I'm glad it happened to me because X, Y, and Z, right? So
Yeah.
you were saying that how did you find out that he was on drugs? Like, did you just happenstance, or like, how did you find out?
I didn't find out till he attacked me, and then it was too late. So
So he was
Because that
hiding
morning,
it all that time.
yeah, because he was only in my house 2 weeks before he broke my face, shattered my face, so,
Oh
and
no.
everything. So, um, and it was weird. And I'm assuming because he was around me, he didn't have his own car, and I wouldn't let him use mine to like just run around in because, it's my vehicle. um, that he couldn't get his fix, and he probably ran out, was my guess. Because that day is when he started acting like just to start, I was going to lay down my son
Mm-hmm.
and I was rocking him before I put him in his crib, and I was upstairs and I told him that the other kids should get in bed because I'm one of those parents that's like, hey, no kid should stay past a certain point because they need to do good in school. They need to,
Routine. Yeah.
yeah, it's just healthy for them. I'm that kind of parent, I guess, the helicopter parent everybody talks about.
I think that makes sense though, because they're so little at that time. Like if you don't set a routine, of course they're gonna want to stay up and play and not go to sleep. We've all been kids before. We know it. We didn't want to go to sleep. So I think that makes complete sense.
Yeah, and then like his reaction to me saying that his children need to go to sleep was to grab me by my wrist while I was rocking my son, leave his bruised fingerprints on my, and then he grabbed his guitar and busted it over my bedpost, like shattering the guitar and everything. And at that point, I was like, okay, something's off. Like nobody reacts
Yeah.
to that volatile for nothing. But he ended up going back downstairs after I de-escalated the situation a little bit, and then I went and laid my son down in his crib, and I went back downstairs to check on the other two children, which were his. They were 6 and 12 at the time. So I went back downstairs and checked on them, and he was in the living room with them, and they were sitting on my sectional. So I sat down for a minute and I was kind of playing on my phone, like
Yeah.
nonchalantly. And he just kept on acting like he was getting more aggressive. Just even like his body movements were really jerky and just super like out of character. And I was just like, John, you need to stop, like literally go calm down somewhere because if you don't, I'm going to end up having to call the cops because you're scaring me. And I no sooner had that come out my mouth than he jumped up and he went to grab my phone and I wouldn't release it. He bit me on my hand to get me to
Oh.
release my phone. And then he grabbed my phone on my hand and shattered it, OtterBox and all, onto my coffee table.
And the
And
kids are there.
they saw the whole thing. And then I got up to grab my phone, and he turned around and hit me twice in the face. And I don't even remember, like, the doctor said after the fact, when I was finally able to go to the hospital 12 hours later, um, which they thought I fell down the stairs at the time because he kept the kids captive, but that's another story.
Oh my god.
But when I was finally had to go talk to the surgeon and everything, they told me like if he had hit me one more time in the face, that I would have been dead because he had been kicking me while I was out, knocked out and stuff because I had bruising down my neck and everything too. That was like in the shape of a foot with a shoe on. So, um,
So he hit you twice, and just to so everyone can understand how horrible the impact was, and how uh, just damaging the impact was. Um, Valerie was kind enough to share photos of the damage, so I am going to share that with everyone here. So that is and this the pictures that you've shared are how soon after the impact are these pictures. So there's one where we can visibly see the extremely black eyes. How soon would you
um,
say that is?
like the following day. So
Oh my
the
god.
parts where it's swollen out and stuff is that literally that night because I used his phone to take those pictures. He allowed me after he pulled a gun on us, and there's a whole scenario, and cops were there, got knocking on the door, and he told us if we made a noise, he was going to kill all of us and have a shootout with the cops, and it was a mess. But that swelling part picture was that night because
Okay.
he was watching everything. Every now and then I would get him to turn his head and then sneak a photo and stuff. So like
Oh, okay. So you snuck
so
those photos with the hope, like, did you know what you were going to do with those photos, or what was going through your mind? First of all, I guess I'll backtrack to the hand grab when you're rocking your son. That hand grab, was that the first time he ever touched you like that?
yes.
Okay, so when that happens, like, what's going through your mind?
I was like, what's your problem? Like, are you okay? Like, in my head, I was thinking, like, so did your ex call you and make you mad or something? Because he was really angry at his ex. He had said that for
Oh,
days, like he was mad over his ex.
Because the
And
kids were dropped on him.
yeah,
Okay, okay,
yeah,
okay, okay.
and that she was dating. Apparently, that she was dating somebody of another race was a problem, and like he was clearly not over her, and that it wasn't really that the guy was a different race. I don't think it was more over the fact that it was another man, but he was just so enraged over it that like he would bring it up and yell and cuss about her and stuff and threaten, make threats. But it was John. I just assumed it was anger. Like he's just mad.
Mm.
He's not over. You know how when you get mad at a person, and you're just like, I wish they would just go away.
You
Like,
venting.
but
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and I just assumed it was that. But it was definitely not more than that. Or, in my head, I didn't think it was anything like that. So, yeah, I try to rationalize when he grabbed my arm that, like, hey, he's going through a lot and stuff. I try to empathize with him
Wow,
to calm
that's
him
so
down.
nice of you. Oh my God. That just shows your heart because in that situation, you're still looking at him with those eyes of this is someone I've known for a very long time. This is a hard situation he's in. So you're looking at him with those eyes. You're not looking at him as, oh my God, he has issues with drugs or he has, anger management issues. So you did mention like, oh, it's just John and he's angry. Is he an angry person or was he an angry person when you were together or when you did know him?
And when we were growing up as kids, like he was the best person ever. I remember like when you're a child and you make dumb mistakes. We were like teenagers in high school, and I remember drinking one time and getting too drunk, and he would be the one that sat there and watched me to make sure I was okay. And he literally, I twisted my ankle one time walking while we were drinking, and he literally carried me to his grandmother's house for
So
like
what
2 miles.
happened? What
I don't know.
happened?
That's what I'm saying. I think that like he had told me before that he had been on drugs periodically, but he went through rehab. He was clean and everything. He'd been clean
Okay.
for a while. Um, I didn't know he got back on them.
Right. Right.
So because before he had always been super honest about like his struggles and what he'd gone through, and I think there was a point where he just got so bad on them that it's done something to his brain. There's so many chemicals you can put in your body before it does damage, and I think that essentially was what caused it. And then on top of it, couple it with like obviously he was probably going through DTs at the time
Oh, sorry. What's
and
DT?
a detox where he
Oh,
was
okay.
like
Okay. Right.
on actively using, but he didn't have enough right then. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't recognize because I'm a normal person. I've always had like I don't mean to say normal, but I have a normal schedule. Like because I was a mom, and I still am. I go to bed at a certain time, like 8 to 9 o'clock, and I get up generally at 6 o'clock in the morning. And I get my baby dressed and everything. So I never noticed that he was up for days until he assaulted me.
Oh.
So because I was like, I just assumed he went to bed when he went to bed. You know what I mean? Because
Right.
like,
Because you're thinking,
you know.
you're viewing him with like these normal lenses of a
Hmm.
a typical situation, a typical routine that someone has. So I can see how you were blindsided by this because you didn't think there were all of these extra factors that were at play
Hmm.
in the back. Um, how, how did you feel after? Because I feel like people also have this misconception like, oh, if I was in that situation, I would beat him right back. I would do this. I would run here. I would lock myself in. Like, everyone talks about these things. Like, for anyone who has been in some kind of trauma in their life and have narrated it to somebody else, there's always that one person who says, oh, if I was in that situation, I would have done this and this and this. But you freeze. At least for me, in a situation that I was in, I froze. What was going through your head, like the first hit, after the first hit?
Well, I remember waking up on the floor, and I don't even know how I woke up, but I remember hearing his daughter crying and his son screaming, "Why, Dad? Why?" And my instinct as a mom was like, she's 6, go comfort her. So I got up and from the floor
After you
and
got
went and sat
hit,
on the couch. Yeah,
so
and
you
I
got
put her on my
hit,
lap.
you fell to the floor. Were you out? Do you know if you were
Yeah,
out? Okay.
I was. I don't remember the other hits that the doctor said he had to have done to do the damage he did. So, um, I was completely unconscious by that point. So I don't even know how long I was unconscious. I just remember waking up and then I heard Lily's crying and Gavin was screaming, and all I could think about like I need to get to that kid. I need to make sure they're okay because that was just my mom instinct kicking
Yeah.
in. So I sat her on my lap on the couch, and she was crying, and she went to lay her head on my chest, and she hit my face with her hand, and when she came back, her hand was covered in my blood, and I was like, "Well, I'm hurt. I'm hurt bad."
Oh, you didn't realize how bad the impact was. You didn't realize it. Okay, so that's probably the adrenaline. It sounds like there was
Yeah.
adrenaline of I need to comfort her. I need to make sure the kids are okay. So you didn't feel anything.
Mm-mm. I mean, my head throbbed, but it like no more than a headache at that time
Right.
because of the, I'm assuming like the adrenaline kicking in and just the damage. Sometimes your nerves go into shock a little bit. Um, and I was on high drive because at that point he had the gun because um,
So after the first
and he
hit, he had the gun.
yeah, it was in the living room. It was like a rifle, so it was leaning against the wall. So he had the gun, and then he threatened to kill me and threatened to kill the kids. And then I calmed him down, and then he threatened to kill himself and went to take a shot. And I pulled the gun away from him as he was trying to shoot it underneath him, and it shot into my ceiling because that's the last thing I wanted him to do was kill himself and the kids there. Like the kids were traumatized enough. I was just worried about them.
Right.
Um, And then he ran upstairs for a few minutes and left, like, took the gun with him, but left his phone sitting on, like, the table. And I was like, uh-oh, I've got to call somebody. So I was friends with my ex-husband, so I called him and I was like, hey, Warren, this is what's happened, yada, yada, yada. Well, John heard me on the phone and came downstairs. So he knew at that point the cops were coming. So he pushed us upstairs into the master bedroom, and the cops showed up. They showed lights in, and he was like, "If you guys make a sound, I'll have a shootout with the cops, and I'll kill everybody here." So of course I'm not gonna like we're not gonna scream. I'm not gonna do anything because I don't want the kids dead, and I don't want to die personally. But I was more
Yeah.
concerned that not if he shoots out all three kids, they could be in the
Yeah.
fall. Um, so eventually the cops, after like 20 minutes left, um,
Wait,
and then
they left?
they left. Yeah.
Even though there was a distress call made to your ex-husband, who I'm
From
sure
my yeah.
urgently told them that, like, this is serious, get over there ASAP, then they just
Yeah.
leave? Like, do they not? Guys, even in movies, this happens. This is like a typical movie scene where you should know that if there is someone who is trying to abuse or hurt their family, especially, they're probably just holding them hostage. They're not just quiet by choice. It's did that aggravate you, or were you just not thinking at that? Like, were you hopeful that they would were you hopeful that they would come in? Like, what was going through your head when you were just being quiet?
No, because as volatile as he was, if they would have, he would have killed everybody in there and killed himself before they got upstairs. So, like, I was glad when they left. As sad as that is, I was. I was legitimately glad when they left.
Okay.
Um, and then after he knew they were all gone, we came back downstairs to the living room, and I had some screen doors that went into my backyard. And I remember stepping out for a minute and breathing in fresh air and stuff. And I kept on looking at the neighbor's house and looking back and then looking at the neighbor's house, but I couldn't, even though I could potentially run at that moment, all I could think is I could see those kids' faces.
Yeah.
And I could see like Lily still screaming and crying and stuff. And I couldn't look because I knew what would happen.
Yeah.
So I stayed. And
Yeah.
eventually I convinced him after 12 hours to let me go to the hospital. And I told them that I fell down the stairs to, so that he kept the kids. I let him, I told him that to let me just take Ronan because he was a baby. He's too hard to deal with anyway. If he wakes up, just let me take Ronan. And so he let me take Ronan. He kept the other two because he knew I wouldn't leave them,
I
even
was
if
just gonna
they weren't
ask,
biologically mine.
like, is that a strategic move, you think? Okay.
Yeah, he knew I wouldn't like leave those kids. I wasn't going to leave them to what was going to happen. So I called my ex-husband at the hospital when I got
Mm-hmm.
there. John let me took his phone. He always checked the text and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So instead, I FaceTimed with a couple of my bosses. I told them what happened and everything. I was like, if something happens to me, you know who did it.
Wait,
Like,
sorry. You're at the hospital right now, like in this point, and so you're at the hospital, and whose phone do you have?
I have John's.
He let you take his phone
Mhm.
accidentally? Like he forgot that you had it?
Yep.
Oh my God.
Yep,
Okay.
and he would check it anytime that like it was around. So I didn't want to text anybody and warn them. I wouldn't want to say anything because like I was afraid that, like I said, the repercussions and stuff would have been the kids, So
Right.
instead, I just FaceTimed my boss
Okay.
because I knew like they couldn't record anything like that. I could delete the FaceTime. It was done. He was, he didn't track it because he never used FaceTime
Right.
anyway. So
Right.
so I FaceTimed two of my bosses at work. I showed them my face, told them what happened, and I told them like that he had ran, which so that they wouldn't show up and try to like do anything. Like I was like, I just need rest, yada yada yada. Like anything to keep somebody from coming to my house to check on me. um,
But you told them
and
that this is what happened. But
I told
don't
them,
have any further action. Like don't come, don't send the cops, don't send anything like that.
yeah, I told them that he ran already, and I was dealing with
Oh.
the cop stuff myself. So
Even though
just
he was still at your place. Okay.
because I was afraid they would. Because like Mez specifically, he was one of my closest friends on top of my boss. Because we worked so closely together, and I and my son spent time with his wife and his kids and stuff. Like we did stuff together, and I knew that if he knew that was going down, he would show up, and then he would die. John would have killed him. So to keep everybody else safe, I just told him that he had ran. I just needed to rest, yada yada yada. I called Warren, told him where the baby was at the hospital with me to come get the baby, and told Warren the same thing that he had ran. And I was like, I just need you to take the baby for right now so that I can get some rest and heal and yada yada yada. And
Mm,
he was like, okay. So he took Ronan, and then I went back for the other two.
okay. Okay. You were able
And then
to like drive or how did you get home?
I drove.
And they let you out of the hospital?
Hmm. I told them that I just wanted to go back home.
Oh, shoot. Even though this is the same doctor that said if you would have been hit one more time. Or no, they don't know. They don't know. They don't know at this
The
point.
surgeon is
Okay.
the one.
They don't know at this point. Gotcha. So
Yeah.
you're basically so the first image I have of you is the one where you're just the black eyes, both of them. There's a big gash on your cheek, and in that state they let you go home
Hmm. Yeah.
because you were insisting.
Hmm. And they had already called the surgeon and told him that like that they scheduled me an appointment to come see them and everything to have my face repaired and worked on and everything. They asked me a bunch of questions. They knew that it wasn't like clearly it was not a fall, but they couldn't do anything because like I was telling them otherwise. So there was not really much they could have done at the time, which I recognized. Um, And then for a couple of days, John just kept us there. And then Warren, thinking I just had John's phone and John wasn't there, told me that he had to bring my kid back because he couldn't keep him at the place that they were at. And I kept on begging him and begging him. I was
Wait,
like, please don't bring my kid back.
what? Yeah, this is like a life and death situation.
But he thought he had ran. So, and
Oh,
he thought I was injured. And I was like, Warren, please, please don't. And he said, looking back, he should have known that something was up because like I've never been that strongly begging and crying him to keep my kid, like,
yeah.
um, but during the week, like it was weird. John would go from things like bringing me coffee, like in the mornings, like nice things, to telling me, oh, I told you I could fight, you know, like to like telling his son that how did he have such a stupid son like him, like just weird things, like his personality switched based on like whatever he was doing. And I kept on during the week, all I could do was like try to convince him, hey John, just go get help, like nothing else has to happen out of this, you just need to go get some help.
Yeah. Did
you
he
know you
ever
know
like accept that? Because I know when it comes to the domestic violence or domestic abuse cycle, there's usually the honeymoon phase where they're apologetic. I'll get help. I'm so sorry. I'll never do it again. And then there's that tension building where they're doing these like they're getting nitpicky, they're getting antsy, they're getting moody, and then the violent act happens again. Or in this case, it seems like the verbal violence happens,
Mhm.
and then it's the apology. I'll bring you coffee, I'll do these nice things, and then it kind of repeats. So in your case, it seems like you didn't have the physical violence cycle repeating, but you did have the violence continuing. And
Yeah,
how
the
long was
emotional.
that? Yeah, the emotional.
I mean, he threatened us every day, what he was going to do, what he had done, told us at the time that a guy that we grew up with that I didn't know about, he said, at one point when I was on really bad drugs, he told me that somebody paid him $500 to set the guy on fire, even though it was his friend, and he did. So clearly, like, there was, like, then the other stuff that he had done that had been super depraved. He threatened to go drive over to my mother's house, shoot her up with fentanyl so that she would die and it wouldn't be traced back to him. Um, because he absolutely couldn't stand my mom. He threatened to kill other family members of mine. There was just like it was like on the emotional roller coaster that entire week, essentially. And then when Warren brought back Ronan, I met him on the front porch so he didn't come inside because I knew what would happen.
Yeah.
And I grabbed my kid. So now I had all three kids again and him.
And
Um,
it wasn't computing to Warren that why is she standing outside? Why isn't she letting me come inside? Like it wasn't
mm-mm.
okay.
He said later on he looked back and he was like,
All the
he felt
signs were
guilty.
there. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
But I think he
That's
was so distracted with work and being tired and everything, he just didn't like register. And which I mean, he would have tried to came into, and he probably ended up dead. I mean, that's just the reality of that
yeah,
situation.
right.
The scariest part, I think, for me was like when that one paid picture where both my eyes are super black. My
Right.
eyes completely swole shut for like 3 days, and I could hear him, but I couldn't see him, and I didn't know where he was at, and I knew he had the gun in the house. And I just kept holding on to Lily's hand every time I went somewhere. His son had to actually walk me to the bathroom to be able to use the bathroom because I couldn't see anywhere. So, and right when I was able to start opening one eye is when Warren brought back Ronan.
Goodness gracious. So that week, all of these things are happening. Are you thinking of an exit strategy or are you just surviving?
My goal was to try to convince him that nothing would be done to him for what happened,
Okay.
that he just needed to get some help, and I went along with things. I cooked dinner after I could see again a little bit. I did everything like it was just normal. It was like nothing ever happened.
Right.
Because I figured that one of two things would happen. He would eventually lower his guard where I could get all the kids out,
Right.
or two, he would go take a run for it, which is what he ended up doing. Um,
Mm.
he had been up every night the entire 7 days, and then that Sunday, which happened to be Easter Sunday,
Excuse me. Oh.
we had a big egg hunt in the house for the kids. I had the Easter baskets I'd already made for them and stuff. Cooked a big dinner, and I made everything just pretend like everything was just normal family stuff. And that night, he finally fell asleep for the first time. So he left the gun. So I dismantled it and hid parts of it all through the house and the bullets.
That's amazing. Like that's so smart. That is so how did that come to your head? Like was that something you were planning or the situation just happened and you're like, "Oh god, what do I do? Like this is the first thing." Or was this a plan?
The plan was the second that he could fall asleep or that I got him away from the gun was going to disappear. you know,
Okay. So the
like
gun was your first focus, like first thing that I need to okay.
to get out of his possession, and the only way to make sure that he doesn't do anything is to dismantle parts of it. So
Right.
I did that, and I threw like all the bullets were hidden in places in the house that he wouldn't have ever been able to find. It'd take him
Oh my
forever to do it. So
goodness.
then that next morning he gets up and he's like really nice and chipper, brings me coffee and everything, and just like it's like almost a switch happened, like
Yeah.
completely a switch, and it just lit up, and he was just like, yeah, everything's good. Now he had had his phone for like 2 days by that time, like all the time.
Okay.
He wouldn't let me have it whatsoever,
And
and
can
I had a
he see
feeling.
the photos that you took?
No, I had them in a secure folder. I had locked with a password so he could never see they were on
Oh
there.
my God. Val, I really don't. How do you think that you were able to think of all of these things? Because I think sometimes when you're in a traumatic situation, you shut down mentally and you like don't know where to start because there's so much going on. There's so much that you need to keep track of, so much that you need to do. How are you like how do you think you were able to do all of these things? Because I feel like the decisions you made, each and every step, allowed your children to be alive and safe, and his children as well, and for you to be alive as well. How do you feel like you were able to make those decisions?
Keeping them in mind that if like it all else failed, that we needed to have proof that this happened so he could never hurt them again. He could never come back and hurt me again. Like I thought about like it wasn't just about getting through that moment, it's about getting through the aftermath, because the reality I do know of people with domestic violence, I mean I have friends that have went through it, and you see it all the time on the news where you go to prosecute somebody that does this and they come right back.
Because there's
And
no
they
proof.
murder them. Yeah, they murder them because there's no proof, because they don't get enough
Oh my
punishment, because it
god.
doesn't look as severe as it is. I mean, there's so many things where they just get a smack on the wrist and that's okay. I mean,
We were
think I
talking
told you
about
that.
this. We were literally talking about this. And in your case, unfortunately, do you want to share, eventually what ends up happening? I think that you were also talking about, sorry, to go back to what you were just saying. My mind
When
is
you're
like just
done.
being blown right now, because I'm just thinking about how strong you must have been to make all of these decisions. I understand that you're saying because you kept keeping the children in mind, but we all need to just remember that this is while Val looks like that, and while she's dealing with her own effects of the battery, that you're also thinking about, okay, I need to build a case. I need to make sure that my kids are safe. I need to make sure that as soon as he falls asleep, like I'm observing his patterns, I'm watching him. So as soon as he goes to sleep, I dismantle the gun. I do this. Like the amount of brain power and mental power that takes from you when you're already not operating at 100%. Do you feel like you were just constantly in survival mode as well?
Yeah, I was.
Because there was the fear of your life being taken away was imminent. It was like every other moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I,
I mean, he could have snapped at any moment because he snapped to begin with. Like
excuse
the
me.
possibility of snapping again was obviously there, at any given time. Um, but like that morning, like after he got up and everything, he was all chipper and stuff, and he was just like, I have to get the kids to daycare, because if I don't get the kids to daycare, they're gonna know something happened. So he took my car and
Mm-hmm.
loaded all three children in it and went to the daycare. And I knew my daycare was like not even three-fourths of a mile from my house. Now I'm panicking at this point because he got my kid and the other two kids in the car. But he had left me with his phone by accident. Again, I guess in his rush to run. And I called the daycare immediately. And I was like, hey, did John get there? And they're like, yeah, Ronan's here. And I was like, what about
Oh
the other
my
two?
God. Yeah.
And she was like, no, he didn't drop off the other two. I was like, change the code on the door, call the cops, do not let John back there now. And I was like, I'll explain everything later. And then I called the cops because I knew he was running with the children.
With the kids. Why do you think he dropped off Ronan and didn't take Ronan with him?
Because I think, one, Ronan was little, he's a toddler, and everybody knows a toddler's a handful.
Mm,
Two, I think he didn't want to end up with another charge if something. And I think in his head, I really do believe, because he told other people on social media after the fact that he he thought that he was just going to be everything was going to be fine and stuff. He did something bad, but it'll be fine. He didn't think I don't think that I would press charges on him, that it was done. I think he thought just by getting out of my presence, leaving my kid, he even left my car. He had a friend, after he took my car, meet him. And then
right.
he drove back my car, left my car, and ran off.
Okay. So it's interesting because it seems like your view of him changed and you weren't viewing him with those lenses anymore of this is my high school friend. We used to be super close. You're viewing him as, okay, he's now a completely new person and kind of a monster. But he's still viewing you with that lens of, this is someone I have history with. We're good. We just had a fallout. We just had some bad blood, but like, we're good now. I don't think doesn't sound like he was understanding the severity. Like, now you violated your friend in so many ways that this is real life. Like, they can press charges. That wasn't even in his head, according to what you're saying.
No, because I told him if he just went and got help, that I wouldn't do anything. I would just let him, like, and all that, and I think that he was convinced that if he left, then I would be convinced that he was going to get help, which I knew that wasn't the case. Like, you don't do the things that he did during an entire week. You don't terrorize people. You don't terrorize children.
Right.
And in any way going to go get help for that, like, clearly your humanity has been turned off.
Yes.
And it's,
yes.
like,
so at no point while you were saying, oh, just get help and I won't press charges, did you actually mean that? You were going to press charges. Okay, good. Yeah. Okay, that's good. So there was was there ever a point in your mind where you were like, oh, we could possibly excuse me, during that week, was there ever a point where you're like, where you were making excuses for him and saying, okay, that's okay, we can get through this and actually go our separate ways, and sure, I might still press charges and all of that, but we can make it through. Like, we can possibly make it work.
No, we couldn't be friends anymore. Nothing after that. He threatened my child. Like, to me, like, had it been just me, I might have been able to deal with that.
Okay.
And been, like, more forgiving. But when he threatened my child,
right,
and he threatened other children around me, like, that, no. Like,
right,
all bets are off at that point. You are officially my problem, and I will deal with it, Like,
right. And the reason I'm asking is that, unfortunately, a lot of domestic abuse situations or violent situations, the partner who is the victim usually, unfortunately, is like manipulated into thinking that the person will change. So they have that hope that, okay, yes, they hurt me really bad, but I'm gonna heal, I'll be okay, and then we can try to work things through. At the end of the day, he is the father or is the mother of my child, and like, we'll work things out, whatever it is. But I'm really glad that for you it was like a hard stop. It was like a nope, that you really crossed that line, and it's a no. It's not gonna happen. Excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, there was some emotional things, like,
oh yeah,
when he left, like, this is one thing I like, it was overwhelming for me because there was some bad aftermath after it too. Because he left, and I remember sitting on the steps. I hadn't even called the cops yet, outside of telling them, like, hey, he's running with kids. They hadn't showed up, done statements, nothing yet. And I hadn't told anybody, my family members or anything. I was just literally sitting on my steps to my garage. And I was thinking, like, I felt guilty. It was Stockholm Syndrome. I felt guilty that he was going to go to jail because of me.
When was this, sorry?
This was, like, right after I got off the phone with the daycare, and I told the cops that he was running with children, it was a kidnap situation, whatever, and I just let them know that, and I hadn't even talked to him. Like, the detective hadn't shown up at my house, nothing had been, shown up yet, and I just sat there on the steps, and I was like, he's going to go to jail for me, because of me. And it's because that's Stockholm Syndrome, because they do play on your emotions intentionally,
right.
Like, and I did recognize, like, intellectually that was happening, but when you're in a situation like that, your fight or flight starts kicking out, and all of a sudden everything comes in waves of everything that you went through and everything you're experiencing.
100%.
Like, I was able to, like, block it up until that point,
right?
And then they had not caught that my brain was swelling at that time, and I actually downed a bunch of pills trying to commit suicide right after that, like within 2 weeks.
Wait, when was this?
2 weeks after.
Okay.
I admit that I was having some bad migraines, like horrible migraines, like puking, like everything. I couldn't figure out what's going on, and like my personality had no emotional control whatsoever. Like it just felt like everything was in the world. Ronan would have been better off without me, like everything. And I was like, and I couldn't understand like why it was that bad because when I went to the hospital, they gave me pain meds. I figured everything was going to be fine outside of the surgery, even though I was still bleeding internally from the hematomas and stuff.
And this is
But
after he's gone to prison and everything.
no, this was when he was running before they caught him.
Okay.
And what happened is like my ex-husband was one called the ambulance and stuff and told him like, I was having a suicide attempt. Of course, I told him straight up that's what I was doing. And of course, they are by obligation have to take you to the hospital. And I kept on telling the doctor, I was like, that, this is abnormal for me. Like everybody gets suicidal, but I never would have tried it. Never, not in a million years. Something's wrong. And they did a head scan and my head was swelling, my brain was swelling again, and it was putting pressure on my skull and stuff. So, and I still have moments like those where like I've literally pulled in. I've been to my mom's a million times, like a million times, and I pulled into the driveway to go visit her, and I got the mail out, went to the picked up all the packages for the UPS, got to the front step, and was going to open the door, and it wasn't even my mom's house, it was the neighbors. Because when I have those head swellings, it's like I don't remember a lot of things, like things just start blocking out. You start like my emotional capacity is lessened. Now, granted, as time is going on, they're having fewer episodes, but they were horrible for probably a good 8 months to a year. And then now I still have them 2 or 3 times a month where they get bad for a couple days at a time.
Right.
So it's just, it's very stressful sometimes because I'm just like, certain things I should remember, like certain people's names that I've known my entire life. All of them I don't know.
Right.
And then eventually it comes back. But it's just brain injuries are definitely a weird phenomenon on their own. But yeah, it's, you go through that period where you do try to empathize with them, regardless, even me. Like I knew, like he needed to go down, he needed to go to jail because if he didn't, the result was his children were going to die, or he was going to get in, with some other girl that felt bad for him, use his children to play on their emotions, and then he was going to kill the next person. Because if he could do that to me after me being his friend for 20 years, and I've always had his back, so what is he going to do to a stranger? What is he going to do to somebody he just met? You know what I mean?
Like there was no loyalty with you or respect. Yeah. Right.
So to me, I felt like I had an obligation, regardless of how I felt about John in the past or anything, to protect the next person from him.
Mm-hmm.
Because clearly he can't be trusted.
Right. Val, you're very strong for keeping that at the forefront of your mind, and of course the safety of the children. And I remember you saying that, Ronan was your why. Like he was your why for the survival and of course the other kids as well, but you were saying Ronan was your why for also turning your life around, which we'll get into. But just to put things into perspective, guys, when I did some research on domestic violence statistics, it said women face in 1 to 3, or every 1 to 3 or 1 to 4 women face some kind of intimate partner violence, and for men it's ranges from 1 to 5 to 1 to 7. Those numbers are very high, which shows how important this subject is to talk about and create awareness about, because it is a part. Like, just think about it. When you're in the subway, right? How many people are in each car? Like 20? That means at least 5 of them have faced some kind of intimate partner violence. That's really messed up. That's a really messed up statistic. It really puts things into perspective that there are so many people suffering silently. Like Val, for example, when she was going through all of these things visibly for a certain period of time, like we could tell, or people could tell that, okay, there's something off about her. But as you're saying, yes, you healed physically, but you have all of these lasting effects that you're still processing, you're still dealing with. You were even saying that you had a lot of sleepless nights, like you couldn't sleep many times as well. So even though, and we were talking about this earlier as well, that physically you can heal from something, but all of those emotional effects and medical effects that linger could take many, many, many years to recover from. And you said about 8 months or so to a year, the headaches, the migraines, the swelling, it was really bad, really, really bad.
Mhm.
And so right now you said the episodes are lessening in frequency, but they're still there.
Yeah.
But they're
And they may
still
be
there.
there my entire life. The doctor said that certain people heal within a few years or a year and then it's done. And then some people have it their whole lives. So it just really depends. So there's no guarantee that I'll ever be gone. But I'm hopeful. And regardless,
I'm
I've learned to
hopeful.
navigate around them. Some of it's just have to be gracious with myself. Like
Yes.
sometimes you just need to stop.
Yes, and I love that you said that, because you were saying that sometimes you get hard on yourself because you're thinking, I've known this person for so many years, like why don't I remember their name? And I think that's something important to keep in mind for all of us, to just be kind to ourselves and recognize like where we've come from, all the trauma that we've been through. I know we don't want to think about it sometimes, but sometimes it's important to remember and put things into perspective that, hey, that's where I came from. That's what happened to me. And that's why I am the way that I am. Unfortunately, we are the product of our past experiences. So it is it's a good thing to be kind to ourselves. And I'm glad that you're conscious of that as well. We talked about this before as well offline, when I asked you, are you comfortable if I called you, or what are you comfortable with? Would you rather I refer to you as a domestic abuse or domestic violence survivor or victim? And the reason I asked you that question is that there was this huge debate, I think like on Twitter or somewhere, or I think I actually see it frequently, where people are like, no, I'm not a victim, I'm a survivor. And or you're not a victim, you're a survivor. And it's like people make it a point to correct you sometimes and say, don't call yourself a victim, call yourself a survivor. And I personally don't think that there's anything wrong in calling yourself a victim, because at one point you were a victim, right? Like you were a victim of, for example, physical abuse or sexual abuse or emotional abuse. That doesn't make you weak. Being a victim doesn't make you weak. You can be a victim turned survivor. And I like what you mentioned where you said you don't get too caught up in semantics. Why is that?
Because, I mean, first of all, we're all a victim of life. Yeah.
Preach. Preach it.
So, to me, at the
Yes.
end of the day, they're just labels.
Yeah.
I mean, if we allow somebody to label us and that label to define us enough that it affects our emotional state, then we're giving away every bit of power we have. You
Right.
know,
Right.
only we can decide what defines us.
Yes. Yes, I agree. And I think sometimes people get too caught up in the labels. And as you said, it gives so much power to those things that it's like, oh, because I said victim, I can't be a survivor. No, it's not like that. You went through what you went through. It made you who you are, and now you're better off, right? Like, I think people forget all of these other things, and as you said, they, get caught up in labels, and it can be very damaging.
Yeah, and you're over here you're very sympathetic in the fact that you're like I don't want to trigger you. We've talked about that even before we got on here, and I'm just over here like, please trigger me. Because if we don't face what we fear, if we don't face our past,
That's
then our past
true.
will always haunt us.
That's true.
Like
Every conversation I was having with Val, I was like really double, triple thinking it as I was typing it. I was like, I do not want to be the root of a trigger. And I'm so glad that like our conversation flowed well, but I was ready. I was ready. I was like, if she says anything like, I'm not comfortable with that, or no, I don't want to talk about that, I don't want to go there, I was mentally prepared to just be like, cool, we'll like totally go. I'd rather ask than dump it on you, and then you're like, are you kidding me? Are you actually going there? Yeah, sorry?
And then just have a panic attack right in the middle of it.
Right? And I'd be like, guys, we need to take 5. So
I mean,
know.
don't get me wrong. I definitely went through a stage of that, but I mean, you could call me masochistic. I'm one of those people that's always been like, I've got to face it, because if I don't face it, it's going to control me. And I'm not going to be controlled because of something somebody else bad did. They cannot define me. I will not allow it.
Right.
And I guess it's a level of stubbornness too, maybe.
Well, actually, I think some would call it stubbornness. I call it resilience. And I think that would that's actually something that I do want to address in the end, because you sent me this beautifully worded paragraph that I want to like pick a few sentences from it and share it with everyone if you're comfortable with that, because I feel like everyone should hear what Val has to say. It was just so beautifully worded, and it really gave me inspiration for that day that I wasn't doing so great. So there was something that we were talking about with the whole victim survivor, and in order for someone to comment on that, you would need to share your story with them. So we were talking about this offline, but when you shared your story, your experience with people, how was it received? And I know you said that there were some not so great reception. So go ahead and share that.
Yeah, like people on the news, some people like there it goes one side or the other. There's not really a gray area when it comes to this. That's when and people's responses. So I've had people that's like, you're so strong, like you're so inspirational, you're amazing, all the good stuff that really pumps you up and like, yeah, I'm in the right direction. Then you got the other ones over here like, well, she's clearly not going to backmouth him another time. The stuff about like, oh, why was he with her anyway? Like these toxic people. And well, the love the women that run around saying, well, she clearly got back with him, and I was like, that never even happened.
They
But
don't even know the
your
story,
judgments, and even if I was that person, you don't know what drives a person, whether it's fear, whether they think that their kid's going to get killed. You cannot judge a situation you're not in.
Yep.
So instead of like being insulting and harmful to another human being, why don't you use that energy to apply some grace to them, because that's what they need at that moment. Like, but
Yeah.
like I said, I don't let it get to me, because at the end of the day, their karma is their own and mine is mine. So whatever they want to, sow in their life is what they will reap. The same with the rest of us. So
It's
that's
true.
not my problem, but I mean, I'll just stay over here and away
Was it
from the
hard though,
toxicity.
like reading those things, and did it get to you at any point?
At first, yes, when I was still healing, especially like emotionally, and I was still having, PTSD moments and panic attacks. And, I was struggling because I was barely sleeping. And then my son was like having a hard time sleeping periodically too. And during that time, because that's what toddlers do, they sometimes regress their sleeping habits. And, just a multitude of things like that at that moment. Yeah. Like, especially when you're exhausted, your ability, like when you don't sleep enough to like process things emotionally, obviously is lowered. So during those times, yes, sometimes I would take it personally. And then I was just like, why? If I met that person in person, would I
Mm-hmm.
respect them? Well, no, because they're cruel.
Mm.
So why am I worried about what they're saying about me?
Oh, wow.
Because
Okay.
if I don't wouldn't respect them as a human being and I wouldn't be their friend and stuff, why do I care what they say?
Right.
Yeah.
Oh man, that is actually really that's a great way of looking at it, and it reminds me of something that there's a book called Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins, and he says something similar to that in the book. And he says that these people that are saying these horrible things to you, do you respect them? Do you care about them? If you don't literally know who they are, you don't respect them, why are you caring about what they're saying about you? So I think that's amazing that you were able to step back, because it's hard to do. That's hard to do. I think generally speaking, most people do get affected by these negative comments, and they do take it to heart, and they do take it like a personal attack, and we do want to like please everyone and like make sure everyone's friendly, like I'm good with everyone. And it's hard sometimes to step back and be like, who is this person though? Like they don't even matter to me. And especially when you're dealing with trauma, it's amazing that you were able to do that. Um,
I mean, go ahead.
no,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead. Go for it.
I saw this video today that it was just this lady. Of course, like I said, I told you earlier, I won't listen to a lot of motivational stuff. I'm like a Tony Robbins, Les Brown kind of person. But this lady got on there and she was like, the only reason that people talk about you in a negative light is because you're already ahead of them.
Mm. Can you say that again, please?
That the only reason that people talk about you in a negative light is because you're already ahead of them. You have built higher than they will have reached.
That's good. And it's usually that's the case. That usually is
Mm-hmm.
the case.
because hurt people hurt people. So,
Yes.
that's the reality. People don't talk about you. People that are happy with their lives and,
Yeah.
fulfilled and stuff, they ain't over here talking about this next
No.
door neighbor.
No.
They're them and their empire and their people they love. So when I look at people like that, I'm just like, I kind of pity you because you have to be awful miserable to have that much
Yes.
angst in you. You know what I mean?
Yes, 100%, 100%. I was talking to my brother about this the other day. I'm like, how do people have the energy to be so awful to others? Like, I'm over here struggling, baby. I am struggling every single day to try to get out of bed and just take care of myself. Just drink my water, get my protein for the day, get some exercise. And you are over there trying to tear people down. Like, how do you have that energy? It's so exhausting. I don't even have energy for myself. Like, I don't know how people do it. And I think it's what you said. You must be awfully miserable. You must be awfully miserable, not have goals, not have other things to do, because you have all of this pent up energy that you have nowhere to channel. It's
Exactly.
wild.
And if you focus half of that energy that you spend like downing on others, doing something positive, how much better would the world be? Like, that's okay. They won't write
Honestly.
stories about you later.
I love it, Val. I love it. No one gonna remember you. um, I know we talked about the negative comments that were on those videos and like that you've heard from people, but was there a part of you that kind of gravitated to any support groups or the positive comments? Like, did you hold on to those in any way?
Yeah.
Okay.
Specifically, mostly from the people that, like I knew, especially
Oh,
them
okay,
because,
okay.
we value people's opinions that we know more. So somebody obviously that we care about is going to have more of an impact, whether they say something positive or hurtful, like one way or the other. I still think we give away our power too much, even in regards to that.
Yeah, I
But,
understand.
you know, it's no, we can't climb the mountain all in one day. So
No.
growth is one of those things that takes little steps. So yeah, it did. It did empower me, and just like I said, the biggest thing for me was I didn't want what John did to define me.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had to experience that one way or the other. So whether it was some sort of divine's way of saving his children, whether it was because there's something worse going to happen to somebody else and I can potentially save them, regardless, as long as I can turn it into something positive, it's worth it to me.
Right.
Like and that way he will never, define me. Like he's not going to. And I think on one of the things I wrote, I was like, he may be physically stronger than me, but he will never be mentally stronger than me.
Yes, that's actually the bit that I was like, oh, that moved me so much. Actually, would you mind if I read it, like a big chunk of it? Because I really, really liked it. It was so well written.
No,
Um,
no, go ahead.
okay, so Val sent me this beautifully written, kind of summary of things that had happened to her and where she is in her life right now. And one of the things that she wrote is, why would I let someone like him win? Someone who didn't care about mine or anyone else's life, including his own. And there was one simple answer: I won't. Anytime the headaches would become unbearable, anytime I was exhausted from falling asleep late, only to wake up several times a night when my son was having issues sleeping, every time my PTSD would kick in, I would remind myself, I won't let him win. He may be physically stronger, but he will never be mentally stronger than me. I won't let him steal another moment of my life and break me into being a shadow of who I once was. That last line brought me to tears. I was at the gym and I messaged Val. I'm like, oh, thank you so much for sending this to me. Like, I'll read it now. And I'm reading it and I'm like just sitting on the mats and I'm like bawling my eyes out because that last line, I think anyone who has gone through any kind of abuse, that's what's so important and special about this talk that we're doing. And I thank you once again, Val. This goes beyond domestic violence. Like, it goes to even just manipulation and emotional abuse and narcissistic abuse. Any survivor of abuse can relate to especially that line. I won't let him steal another moment of my life and break me into being a shadow of who I once was. I think a lot of victims of abuse and survivors of abuse can relate to that because you are no longer yourself. I think you even said in the 2 weeks, like when you were contemplating suicide and you were, you said that's out of character. Like, I don't do that. That's not me. That's not me. You know, that's scary. That's scary when you don't even own yourself anymore. You are not yourself anymore. And I think a lot of victims and abuse have felt that at some point in their journey where they don't belong to themselves anymore. And they're literally just a ghost going through life, going to work, going to whatever it is, but you're not really yourself. You don't know who you are anymore. And thank you so much for sharing that, especially. Like, that was really beautiful. What do you think got you to that point of just that click of, you know what, I'm not gonna let him win anymore?
Well, that after it happened and everything, I recognized like I didn't even have the energy to play with my child anymore. Like my emotional energy was like zapped. Like I ain't even gonna lie, like my parenting at that point was like, here's your TV, kid. Like just sit there, I'll watch you, but like I just don't like the engagement. Like I emotionally had shut down. And I just looked at him and I remember him like wanting to play with me. And he was like toddled over with one of his little toys and I was like, Mommy just can't. Mommy don't like I can't. Like, not right now, baby. And I remember thinking like, no, he doesn't he deserves a mom that isn't broken. He deserves like a mom who's there emotionally, mentally, physically, can provide for him in the way that he needs. And you know what? I deserve it. After everything that I've been through, I deserve it.
Yeah. Did you go to
So,
therapy at all or anything? Or
yes.
okay.
I've been in therapy for years before that.
Oh,
Like
okay.
periodically. I've always been an advocate for therapy, even when you're balanced, like, and there's
Yes.
nothing wrong with not being balanced. There's nothing wrong with the fact that you're coping with your issues, but having somebody objective to sit there and be like, hey, maybe this is the reason you choose this. It helps you understand yourself and others so much more. There's a whole saying that says, and this is what I think draws people to people like, even like John, where I wanted to help him naturally, regardless of the fact that his life was all over the place.
Right.
A child raised in chaos thinks chaos is home.
Did he have a chaotic childhood?
Oh yes, it was. I mean, his mom had been in jail most of his childhood. He was raised by his grandmother, like, and even as he's growing up, he's losing jobs. He's getting other jobs. Like, he kept a chaotic life. And even me, like, my parents didn't have healthy communication normally. There wasn't the physical violence or anything like that. But at the end of the day, if you don't you're not around people that accept other people's boundaries. If you're not around people that respect each other and don't talk to each other and insult each other, you think that's normal. You think that's healthy for a long time.
Yes.
But that's not healthy human interaction.
Right.
And at some point, we got to recognize that, like, hey, even though that was our representative of what is normal, it's not normal, and we can break these generational curses.
Yeah. Yeah.
But and it's not to blame anybody above it, like our parents or anything like that, because you can only teach what you know, but our job is to learn.
Yes. Let's go, Val. You are right. It's true. It's true. And I don't think that's an excuse. I know a lot of people use that as an excuse of, well, this is all I was taught. And that, like, the next 60 years of my life, this is all I'm going to do. What's the point of living then if you're not growing, if you're not learning, if you're not changing? And I love that you said that that's our job, like, to break the generational, the generational trauma. We can do it. There is hope. There's 100% hope. That way, when Ronan, by the grace of God, he gets older and like he has a healthy long life, he is going to not have the generational trauma that your parents had and their parents had and all of the, like, that's the goal, right? Like, it's to break it. And it's beautiful that you're conscious of that. It's wild to think that there are still so many people out there that I've actually spoken to that use that as like, that's all I know. I treat you this way because that's how love was expressed to me. That's all I know. My whole thing is, if you're in your 30s, I'm sorry, but there is no excuse. If you're maybe like early teens, late teens, fine, early 20s, you can be a little ignorant. But if you're in your 30s, there is no way have had such little experience in life and in human interaction that you don't know how to treat people with kindness. You don't know how to treat people with respect. You don't know how to treat people with love. And by the way, this is not me talking about John per se. It's in general people that, I meet and I interact with. And I'm like, you're just rude. You're just mean. And there's no excuse for that behavior, And
I'm just like, it sucks for you that you're giving away all your power to be a better version of you. You're limited how much knowledge you have.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yes. Yes. And like, they like proudly stand by that statement. It's wild.
There's nothing prideful. If you are damaged, you recognize you do things incorrectly, but you don't want to correct it. Because then you are responsible, not your parents, not your friends, not your cousins, not your grandmother, just you. You gotta We are not responsible. We are not to be blamed or responsible for the trauma that's caused us, because we all experience trauma in life in some form or fashion. We are responsible for our own healing.
Yes, exactly.
And the only person that we can blame for not healing is ourselves.
Yes. And my brother actually said something really interesting yesterday, because we were talking about narcissistic abuse and surviving that. And he said that part of healing is accepting where you went wrong, where you could have done better, where you allowed yourself to be manipulated. And I thought that was a beautiful thing to say, because I feel like true healing comes from a certain level of accountability for yourself as well. And looking back to my experiences, I've definitely seen where I could have like recognized things better, or stood up for myself better, or just, removed myself from a situation that was damaging me, damaging my health, my mental health, me as a person. Like, I mean, I'm still healing from it, but you genuinely lose yourself. And if you keep putting the blame on the other person of like, they were horrible, they did this, I feel like it kind of takes away a little bit from your healing journey. And you're right. The only person that you can ever truly get closure from is yourself. When you accept that this is where I went wrong, and I forgive myself from it, and I'll be kinder to myself going forward. That's such a beautiful way to like, it's an essential part of your healing journey, in my opinion, because I don't think you could truly heal without doing that part.
And energy does attract energy. Whatever energy we have, there's like, even with the John situation, I didn't attack him. I didn't even cuss at him and say rude stuff to him. But what I did do is I saw another broken person. And because being a person that has abandonment issues, I looked back and I didn't want to let anybody else feel like that. I didn't want his children to feel like that. So because of that, guess what I drew in?
Okay.
At some point, and that's something I had felt. Sorry, somebody called.
Oh, sorry.
But if you don't deal with the things that hurt you in the past, we're going to make decisions sometimes. And that isn't to say not to help anyone.
Right.
But I wouldn't have drawn in that. I would have been more like, hey, there's a reason why you just started a job and you have 2 kids and you got them dropped off on you, but you didn't pay child support and you don't really have a place to go. Like, what kind of sort of your decisions? But instead, I just saw a hurt person and a hurt person needing help. And that's, that's like, and that's what ends up happening is if we don't heal from that part, those abandonment issues, those trust issues, those issues that have been drawn from time with us, it's like, we don't even recognize, and I watch this as I'm raising Ronan, those moments as a parent, we don't even recognize we're doing it. So it's not to blame anybody. But I look at my son, and I remember he was like over in the bathroom trying to tie his shoes. And I'm just over here like, in my mind, I'm wanting to be like, hey, baby, we need to go. We got to get you to school. I got work to do. I got this, and this. And then I realized, like, if I stop him, then I'm teaching him, one, not to, that I don't believe he can do it. And if I don't believe he can do it, he's going to stop trying. Right now is the perfect point where I'm teaching him not to have instant gratification, where I'm teaching him patience, where I'm teaching him to believe in himself. And it's something as small as that can affect the rest of his life.
Yeah. Yeah, he'll always remember that. It's so true. Again, I was talking to my brother about this recently, that it's crazy how there are certain memories that I have of my childhood that he was there for as well, that he
Hmm.
doesn't remember, or that my parents don't remember. Or my sister has a memory that I don't remember, and I was there because that was special to her. For whatever reason, she held on to that memory, and that affected, how she led her life after that. We never know what that triggering memory is going to be that will just be like, I remember 10 years ago, my mom, I was really struggling with tying my two shoelaces, and I know we were late, but she just let me do it, and then I finally got it. That was the first day that I ever tied my shoelace, and my mom was patient with me. Like, you don't know. You don't know if that could be the memory that sticks out to him, and it's beautiful that you're conscious of that.
Oh yeah, and then there is even like even for the people that are biblical, almost in every world religion, which I'm not Christian or anything, but almost every world religion, there's an expert that says, um, basically that the sins of the parent will become the sins of the child, and I think that's taken way too literal. I think
Mm.
it's metaphorical. Any of our issues unhealed become our child's issues. We have
Right.
anxiety about, like, say, the dark. Well, we're going to say that around our kid, and guess what? It's going to give them anxiety about the dark. I
Yes.
mean, it's literally every single thing that has some sort of an impact on our kid.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the reason I always tell my kid, like, if I mess up, like, I'll raise my voice a little bit or something. I'm going to my child, I'm like, I'm so sorry. Adults should not raise their voice. I know I didn't yell at you or say anything like that, but that doesn't mean I should have raised my voice at all because I am the
Mm-hmm.
example. I should be the. And he's like, well, that's okay, mommy. Sometimes we make mistakes, but I'm teaching him that I'm accepting my own humanness. I'm teaching that I'm not perfect because I think so a lot of parents try to pretend like they're super powerful. They don't do anything wrong. That's not the case because then you raise a child later on that doesn't accept their own humanness,
Yeah.
that they're not perfect, and they're always striving for perfection that they'll never achieve
Never.
because it was built into them.
Yeah. And they never
And,
apologize either for their shortcomings.
yep.
I don't think parents realize how much of a big deal it is for a child to hear their parent apologizing and being holding themselves accountable for their shortcomings and being human, being kind of bringing themselves down at your level and saying, I'm sorry, I messed up, I shouldn't have yelled like that, or that was really unfair of me to do, or I shouldn't have done that, I should have asked you first before blah blah blah, whatever it is. um it also, I think, makes the relationship more like relatable. You stop
Hmm.
viewing them at this unachievable, unattainable level. Like, I will never be able to get that close to my parent because there's just certain things they're not going to understand. They're
They're
never going to get
omnipotent.
it. Yeah, 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 exactly. But I think that takes away that element of their God, because I definitely grew up with thinking like my parents are flawless.
Yeah,
They've
super
never
powerful.
made wrong choices in their life. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it kind of gets perpetuated with some of the things that they say. And like, thankfully, I think my mom, especially because she was in the medical field, she always says that the medical field taught her so much. And so she had, even growing up, she had like a lot more emotional intelligence than the average person, like in her generation. So I got very fortunate with that. Like, she would always apologize when she messed up and things like that. And I slowly it kind of like rubbed off on my dad. So he kind of did it as well. But I know that that's not the norm. And I know that there are so many people out there who have never received an apology from a parent. And
Hmm.
that does have damaging effects. That does have lasting effects on them. Darder says, my mom isn't good at apologizing. That's why I do try to apologize. I learned from her because I know what the other side of the spectrum looks like. Yeah, exactly. And it's great, again, that you're trying to break that. But there are certain people that might take it the other way of like, well, I never heard the apologizing, so therefore I'm never going to be the one apologizing, and then that's how they stick to it. I do want to end off with a couple of things. And one of the things that I remember seeing in the news video is that you said people can reach out to you asking about your essential oils, and that would make it known that they're in a domestic violence situation, and you'll kind of connect with them, keep checking up on them. Is that something that you're still doing, or is there another way people can let you know that they're in a situation like this, or how has that changed in your life?
No, I'm still doing it. Most of them reach out to me, like mostly on Facebook and social media stuff, platforms like that. I've gotten random messages. The whole essential oil thing is so that they know that they're in a I know they're in a kidnap situation, so I can send the cops there. I've had
Mm.
to do that quite a few times since that has been posted over the last few years. And of course, the cops always call me back, and I know what the status and how they're doing and everything like that. Um,
Oh, and that's how
and
they get you get their address, because you're shipping the oils.
the free sample.
Genius. The free sample. Genius. Oh, that's so good. Okay.
So I have them just reach out to me and ask for a free sample of my product, give me their address, and I'm just like, and then I'll find the cops and the number in that area, and then I'll call them and dispatch them to that address with the person's name that obviously is requesting it. So it isn't necessarily always females. If a male feels like they're being threatened to, like, it doesn't matter to me. Like, violence is violence. It's not
Exactly.
gender specific,
Yeah.
honestly. I mean, at the end of the day, and it would be the same if I thought, if somebody messaged me and said there was a kid in danger. Okay, well, I'll send the cops there. Like, regardless of the situation, like, I think that's the only way that we're going to protect each other. And I think, like, you asked me before if I thought that was any way that it will ever be, there will be, like, completely no domestic violence. But I don't think that's ever going to be the case. I think that's a far stretch because of the fact that there's so much depravity in the world. There's a lot of good people and there's a lot of depraved people. And I think with every good is bad. I mean, anything we do in life, the bad, we can turn into something good. Even as sad as it is, death actually teaches us to appreciate life.
Mm.
So there's always a duality to things. But at the same time, I do think that we can lessen the impact, lessen how many people are becoming victims by not giving perpetrators slaps on the wrist, by making sure that there's, instead of like they're just going to prison as a punishment, that there's a rehabilitation with therapy and things like that for these inmates, because otherwise they're going to go, what's the chance? They're statistically more likely to come back and be perpetrators of some sort of other crime, and they generally exceed what they did previously. But we got to get those things in place,
Right.
you know. And the same goes with like when they knocked on our doors, and they were, the cops did, and they just left. I'm sure they're used to like some people making prank calls on them, but it's not
Mm.
worth the risk. You know what I mean? Like, you should fully investigate something before you just completely disregard it.
Yes.
Um,
God.
because that could have been just a child by themselves, and somebody's going to kill a child, and you just walked off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who it is. We have to value enough human life that we make that important.
Yeah.
Luckily for me, I was glad that they didn't come in, but that's the rare scenario where you don't need them to, like.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I think, like I said, rehabilitation is a big thing too, because it's become a punishment, which is like good. They do need in some way punished, I guess, especially for the victims' family, and stuff like that. They feel like they need some sort of justice done, but it does no good if there's no rehabilitation afterward, because eventually, like John is going to be set free. His children, I think his youngest child will be like 17 by the time he's set free. So, like, at the end of the day, what stops him without the right resources in place from repeating this to somebody else?
Yeah. And you
I
said it's
was
only 6 years, right? He only got 6 years.
6 years, and then if he backs up in prison at all, he gets an additional 3. But that's it.
For almost
So, like,
killing you, mind you, Val's surgeon told her that if he hit her one more time, she would have been killed. And you all saw the injuries. This is very serious. This is not 6 years worth. If you notice, in this picture, look at her eye. I feel like if he could have taken away your eyesight, even permanently
both of them
damaged
were
your
like
eyesight.
that.
Yeah. And those are stitches here and on your temple right here, right?
Mm-hmm. That's what tubes where it was internally bleeding for weeks afterward. They had to drain all that blood out of my face.
6 years.
Yeah.
For almost ending your life. And 3 other children. And 3 children. Because he didn't want to stop with you. He wanted to kill the 3 as well.
I mean, and himself. I mean,
And
and cops. Like there's so many things to that. Like, I don't think he's ever learned his lesson. Even in court, when I faced him, that was the one time. After I dealt with my PTSD, probably about 6 months later, I didn't have any more nightmares. I didn't, because I faced it so much. But then court happened, and I remember my brother showed up, one of my brothers, and the other
mm-hmm.
one was at work, and then my mom and them, and I remember looking over at him, and I started having a panic attack because I didn't think I was gonna like. I
See
just did
him.
not expect that at
Yeah.
all. But he looked right at the judge, and he told him that yeah, I basically was at the wrong place at the wrong time. He wasn't even mad at me. He was mad at his ex-wife. That all I did was ever help him. And the judge asked him, like, why'd you do it? And he was like, I just was going through a lot of things. And he was like, well, were you on drugs, Mr. Cheney? And he was like, no. And I was like, sitting over here thinking, you just look more like a sociopath for lying. But like,
Mm.
that's fine, like, whatever. But I said my piece to him and everything. And that's literally all he got at the end of it. But like nothing's gonna stop him because I mean even the victim's advocate there told me like, hey, he's probably gonna apologize to you, which he did. He told them that the we should still be together, which is really weird. But he told the judge that actually. But the victim's
What?
advocate was like, he will probably apologize because he wants a lesser sentence. He wants it to look good on him.
Oh.
So I don't think that that's actually a legitimate apology. And I was like, I didn't think so anyway. I was like, you don't do the stuff that he did,
Right.
without, and you feel like you have a soul, like especially after he told me he set somebody on fire. Like, who could do that? Like, I don't care what kind of drug, whatever you're on. I've been drunk quite a few times in my life. Granted, that's not drugs, but I never thought about like going and trying to like hold somebody captive or beating the hell out of them or killing them or hurting children or choking them or setting somebody on fire. Like, that never hits in your head as a normal human being. Like,
Yeah.
even when you're mad, you don't think of all, like, there's a level of depravity that I think he snapped. And I think that's what happens is a human can do so many things before their actual humanity starts stripping away.
Yeah.
And I have to argue that a lot of times I don't think there's a certain point that you cross over a certain line that you can't get it back. And
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, I think for John, he's not going to get it back. You can't do that to your own children. How can you have your own children? You watch them from the time that they're born and you look in their face and that trust and everything, you break it. Like, to me, there's no coming back from that.
Yeah. And I mean, you were saying that while you had your black eye, you had your stitches, all of that, you're cooking, you're in the house. So he's seeing you at every point of the day. So it doesn't make sense that there is at no point in the day where you're looking at this person and you're like, shit, I did that. Like, she's in pain because of me. I did that. Because you know how, like, let's say that he was in a rage or whatever. Eventually, you snap out of it and then you realize, like, I messed up. But it didn't seem like he had that messed up. Buying someone coffee is not an I'm sorry for messing your face up and possibly almost killing you. You know what I mean? So I agree with what you're saying. It's like this it's something just snapped. He wasn't there. And that's no excuse, but he wasn't there. Wasn't there
Yeah.
mentally.
And that's not the, like, when he ran, he took my pain pills with him. And I couldn't get refills till my surgery. So I was in agony for days because, the whole drug pandemic that their whole epidemic that they're worried about and
Right.
stuff. So he literally took the pain pills that were from him crushing my face. And I was in agony for about 3 days before they did the surgery.
Did he want to get a high off of
And
them? Like, why did he take them?
that or to sell them or something to try to get away. I don't know exactly what his reasoning, or maybe trade them for his actual fix, which was meth at the time. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know, but he did. He took them, and what's funny was he replaced them, and I didn't even notice he had taken them because they were in my pill bottle with my name on it. And then all of a sudden I was like, why aren't these working? And I pulled out the pill and looked it up on pills.com, and he had replaced it with Tylenol.
Oh my God. That's how you figured it out.
Yeah, because I was like, these ain't working. Like, I'm hurting too bad. Like, that's not.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah. He stole, it wasn't just that. He stole, like, my old wedding rings, my engagement rings. He stole my debit card. There was a bunch of stuff in the house that he stole when he ran. And like I said, somewhat, I'm sure, to have money to flee on and all that stuff. But Because at that time, everything was shutting down, so he wasn't going to work. So the only income at the time was mine in the house.
Oh, okay, okay. Definitely trying to sell your stuff then to get some money.
Hmm.
And he only got
Yep.
6 years for that. Like, that just blows my mind. And what's scary about this is you look to the justice system for justice. You look to the justice system to kind of like avenge you everything that you've lost. And this is what comes out on the other end. And as you said in our messages, you said this is probably one of the reasons that people don't come forward, because they're like, what's the point? And what you said earlier makes a lot of sense too. You don't get justice, and you possibly put yourself in more danger because they come back for you. Like, oh, you think that you could take me down? Give me 6 years, I'll come out, or 8 years, or 10 years, whatever they get, and I'll come after you then. Terrifying. And it breaks my heart because the statistics say that it's 1 to 3 or 1 to 4 women experience intimate partner violence, and 1 in 5, 1 in 7 men. Those numbers are so high. And these are just reported, by the way. So how many are slipping under the radar and not being reported? And for various reasons, out of fear or not being able to, or they're being held captive and they don't have the means to. It's really scary. And what do you think needs to change to get more justice? Or like I don't know, what do you think needs to change? What do you think the justice system would have done differently in your situation?
Well, honestly, he needed a stiffer sentence. Honestly, once you're found guilty of something like that, they need to increase the laws on that. That is absolutely ridiculous. Um, Anytime that there is a risk of like the person actually murdering somebody, then that should be a more stringent punishment. That's what is not happening. Like I told you before, I have a friend literally that I met through like these, reaching out to other people and trying to help them cope and everything with the things that they've been through. And there was a lady that literally that had she's paralyzed from the waist down because the guy crushed her spine, and he got literally less than 30 days and he was back out. Like that shouldn't be a thing
No, it
ever.
shouldn't be. No.
And the same applies to men too. Like if it was a woman that stabbed a man, then you attempted to kill him. You need a stiffer penalty. You shouldn't be just out and slapped on the wrist because you're a girl. The same thing. Like we at one point we gotta value life, and the system is made in such a way now that it protects the perpetrators more than it does victims.
Yes.
Yes, I can go get an EPO, but what does an EPO do to a sociopath other than piss them off? Did they listen to laws? It's like that argument. Did like criminals don't listen to laws? We listen to laws. You know what I mean?
That's a good
So,
point. Oh my God. Oh my God. And it kind of almost makes you want to take justice into your own hands. But guess what? You can't even kill someone out of self-defense because you're just going to be held accountable. Like I got pulled over at the airport because I had this keychain. It's a self-defense keychain. And my mistake is I had it with my keys, right? So I had it in my purse, and I forgot to take it out and put it away. It wasn't even in my mind. Tell me how they stopped me at the airport and they were going to arrest me. I understand that appearances can be deceiving, but do I look like someone who's just gonna go around killing people on the airplane? Why don't you actually stop the people who are doing horrible things instead of wasting your resources doing a background check on me? They put me aside. I was terrified. They confiscated that. They took a picture of my driver's license. They searched me in the system, and they're like, oh, you're clean. Don't worry. They're like, this is a criminal offense. I'm like panicking so hard. And I find out that it's illegal what I'm carrying. I didn't know that. And then I find out later that, wait, that means I can't have that. I can't have pepper spray. I can't have a shank. I can't have anything on me to protect myself. So, okay, just assault me. What? And then if you do kill someone, they end up dead somehow in the self-defense, there's still a chance that you could get prison time. How does that make any sense? It doesn't make any sense. It's as you said, it makes you want to just not report it. Might as well just suffer in silence, But for those people who we don't want to suffer in silence, what do you suggest that someone does who is in a situation like this? Like, this traumatic thing has just happened, what should they do? What are the next steps?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. When he ran, it took a week and a half before they called him over state lines. He crossed state lines and everything. He actually chartered a bus with everything they sold off my stuff, then got a bus with him and his kids and went back to Kentucky when they called him there. And I remember sitting in the house and I was thinking, because I was having to pack everything up because we had to have a plan. Because like there was also a chance that they were going to let him out, even though he's a fugitive in another state. When they did catch him and held him in Kentucky, because apparently he had a warrant in Kentucky on him. So there was a chance that they would let him out on bond. So I knew that he would come back for me, especially knew that I was pressing charges now. So at this point, I was like, my little brother lives in Michigan. I had to call my little brother. I was like, hey, if I call you because they let me know he just got out of jail, I've got about 4.5 hours to get like safe. And I need you to take Ronan, so I need you to meet me halfway. You grab my kid, make sure he's safe because I have to be here because of my the surgeries and everything, and the court stuff. So I had to I already have a hotel prepared just in case that happened. I had to switch out cars with one of my best friends so that he didn't recognize my car, and I pretty much had to go into hiding on my own. And it wasn't like anything the cops were going to help me with. There was no protection there. So my thing is, you need to make a plan.
Okay.
That gets out with safe people.
Okay.
That so if there's a scenario where you're trying to get out, the first thing you need to do is make sure that you're safe. And then there's also in the United States there is a victims program that you can get a hold of. That the second they're found guilty, that you can have all of your personal information, like where you actually live, your address, and everything. It cannot be posted publicly. You need to actually add it to that so that anytime you move somewhere, get away from where they know you're at. Keep your address and everything not posted publicly. Don't put it on social media. Don't put it on anything because, you could add just this random person. You think it's just a person, but they've stolen somebody's account and found out where you're at. So you have to be very diligent about not making sure they don't know where you're at.
Okay.
And it's very easy to do that portion. The problem is there's a lot of people that don't have a support system. Like, I have an ex-military brother, and I had my mother that was close, and all this stuff where I could just stash my stuff when it went to court and stay with her until I healed and stuff like that, and while I was working and everything like that. But some people don't. Some people because a lot of times abusers, they like to
cut you off
from your resources. First of all, if anybody ever tries to do that with you, they're toxic. Please walk away. But I've heard of that happening with everybody else, where they so many people that I've talked to that they just lost all connection with their family. Hell, their boyfriend or whatever will start a fight with their family just so their family don't want anything to do with them while they're together. They will cause little bitty ripples of problems there.
Exactly.
So they isolate essentially. So first of all, if that ever happens, walk away before then. But if for some reason, you've rationalized, you've been through trauma and you've rationalized they're really not really that bad or whatever, because we've all done that at certain points in our life.
Yes.
Where we gave people more credit sometimes than they were worth.
Yep.
And sometimes it paid to our favors and sometimes not so much. But if there's ever a point where that happens, you need to have a game plan. Even whether there's so many forms of working online and stuff like that, find something to make money online, have your own bank account, have money back, and have an exit strategy.
Okay. I think that was a really important thing. I think having a separate account, no matter how deeply you are in love with someone, I think it's always important to have a separate account. You can have a joint account and all that, but I think a separate account, God forbid there's ever a situation, not even violence, let's say it's just a situation, I think you need to have access to your own money or some of your own money that person doesn't have access to. And I feel like someone who is mentally healthy and is just a healthy person won't look at that like, oh, you don't love me. If they start to guilt trip you, I think that is a red flag. Right?
Yep.
I feel like that is something that definitely you need to be wary of. So the abuse happens. Let's say you don't have a network. Hotel.
Another area. Hell, take a bus if you have to. If you don't have a car, get on a bus.
I was just thinking if they don't have a Uber, bus.
Right. Somewhere
Okay.
where they're not tracking you, and you do it from an app that they don't have access to. Make sure you change all your passwords. Anything they can find, they have access to, you change it before you make any moves. Because otherwise, they can still track you that way. Because oftentimes, especially if you're in a relationship, which luckily me and John weren't, but if we had have been, most of the time when you're in a relationship, you've been together a while, you have each other's passwords, so you can log into their Uber account, know exactly where they dropped them off at. Like, make
Oh
sure you
my
do all that.
God. That is true. Okay. So maybe like download a Lyft, for example, or something, the Lyft app. Like, so a different app. Okay, so they should be conscious of uh, the password sharing. They should be conscious of any access to information that that person can get. Don't go there. Or I mean, if you
Mhm.
really want to, I don't know if they people have the mental capacity at that time to play a game. Like they could literally call an Uber for a certain location, but then use a different app to actually grab a cab to somewhere else. That could like get them off your trail. That could be something good that you could do. So hotel, or you have a support system, get to safety, have have income coming in from somewhere, proof. That was a big thing that you did. Proof. So as soon as the injury happens, or soon after, try to have proof of it. Voice recordings, can that be admissible in court? I don't know.
Most states not without their knowledge. So, no.
Okay, that's stupid, but
The
okay.
documentary is, like it's not hard sometimes if you, especially if you're a person that goes out, goes to the grocery store, goes whatever, and you see somebody and they see that your face is not damaged, your body is not damaged. You went home and the only person there is your significant other, and then you're damaged. It's very easy to start collecting things like that, especially if you're worried that when you go home something's going to happen. You can always have a person you go to where you're like, hey, look, I'm fine right now. You know,
Okay, that's smart.
you
Okay,
know.
so have an interaction with a couple of people after the injury so that people, you're on their radar kind of. Or
Mhm.
you can even consult with them later and be like, you did see me, right? Like as a possible witness or as someone who can at least corroborate your story. Okay, that's
Mhm.
good. Um, the video call, I think that was also something really smart that you did, because sometimes you might not be able to interact with someone but video call. And I know that there's certain phones that allow you to actually record the video call. I don't know if it's just a Samsung thing, but that's something that people could do on the other end as further proof. If
There's several apps that you can
right,
get for free on your phone that do that stuff. Yeah.
okay. Okay.
Regardless of what type of phone it is, there's free apps for that all the time.
Right.
Um, and then obviously, if you can get the proof from texting them. I mean, honestly, like there's times like where like John would take the phone and he was texting his mom about what he did to me. Like and then I would grab the phone like to just act like I was like he would let me have the phone to tell my family I'm okay, like, don't stop in kind of thing. Just like make sure that they didn't show up because if I didn't respond to any of them, guess what?
They're
They're
gonna
gonna show
come.
up.
Yeah.
So as soon as I would get on there, I would check some of the texts he sent to the people that were like his mother who knew what he did but didn't care, and I would back that stuff onto secure, like secure folder and stuff like that, where he admits that he what he did to me and stuff. Like I would put all that backed up onto drives so that he would not see that I did it, but I still had access to it.
Okay, so a secure folder if you are using the person's phone, and that secure folder was backed up to a drive, I guess.
Yep.
Okay, okay, that's good. And for
A cloud, anything like that works. You can use Google,
right,
for all
right,
Google Drive.
Google Drive, exactly. Okay, and so you said that you got your family involved. Would you recommend getting family involved, or do you think that that's normally someplace that the person would look first?
It depends. If it's like if you go for the person you talk to most, are going to expect that.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
If like you talk to your mom every day and something happens and you disappear, what do they expect you at? Your mom's.
right, right.
You want to go for somebody that like you do know, but they're not going to guess is where you're going to be. Probably the one they're going to least expect, actually. So
Okay.
especially if you have a family member that's out of state, but you still talk to a couple times a year and stuff, that's the best place to go. You're out of
Mm,
their area. They're not going to
okay.
expect you to be there.
Right.
And most likely, they didn't, even though they know that they live in, say, Florida, they're not going to know their address because you're not there enough.
Okay. Okay. And can you repeat the address protection service, please? That people should sign up to as soon as they something happens.
Yeah, as soon as there is it goes to court and stuff and they're found guilty, there is a at least in Ohio and most states that I've researched, they have a program in place that you can be part of a victims program where you can have any of like your current address and stuff removed from like Google stuff like that where you can look at it. So making sure that you don't have any published version of your address that they can just easily search
Mm-hmm.
is important. Like for right now, it looks like I still live in Columbus, Ohio, and I don't. So,
Yeah.
you
Okay.
know, so it also throws them off the trail. And when I was there, I lived in Columbus, so for all he knows, I still live in Columbus. But
Perfect. And I hope he continues to think that way.
Mhm.
Because, yeah, we don't want him on your trail at all. Hi, Flower. Dar Dar says that's something that my boyfriend and I talked about too, because I want to have our own bank accounts and one extra one where we can share. Exactly. Very happy he
Mhm.
agreed to it. It's not because we don't trust each other, just want to have our own freedom too. Absolutely. And I feel like people forget that before you get into a relationship, you are your separate people and you have your own expenses, they have their own expenses. And as long as the shared bills are getting paid and your shared financial goals are being met, there's no
And their own
reason.
identity,
Sorry?
and their own identity, they shouldn't lose their
Yeah,
identity.
exactly. There's no reason where you need to ask them, like, hey, I'm about to spend $200 on, like, I don't know, Ardeen or like whatever, wherever people shop online. You don't need to ask them for permission. You just do it. As long as it's not affecting, your ability to pay rent and all that stuff, like, it shouldn't be an issue. But I'm glad that you're having those conversations, Dardar. It's great.
That's so 1950s, like when the women had to go ask. And I did the same thing, and I was married for 12 years. I was just like, hey, like I know you. You're one of those people that like constantly see every dollar come out of the bank account. And I'm just like, I have to have one of my own because if I buy you a Christmas present, you're gonna know exactly what I get.
Exactly, exactly. It's true. But
And
also it's also like you don't want to be questioned about everything that you're purchasing. How many times have I walked into Dollarama not think I'm gonna buy something and I walk out with like $50 worth of art supplies? I don't want my man asking, "Would you buy?" And like that also not out of excitement, but more just like critically. You just spent $50 yesterday at Dollarama. Why? I have a thing for dollar stores. Like I love dollar stores. So that would be a
Mhm.
thing for me. It's always on my credit card statement every month without fail. And I think that would definitely cause problems. So no, it's good, Dar Dar, that you're having those conversations. Very good. And the last bit that I wanted to end off with is reading another little blurb that you wrote, where you said, "It's not easy. There are times you'll doubt yourself. There are times you will feel it's too hard, but those are the times that the beauty of human resilience shines most." And I think we were talking about that, the adrenaline as well. Those are the moments you will find strength and passion you never knew existed. Your dreams will grow and you will blossom into someone you have never been more proud of. I look back now and I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the trauma. I'm grateful for the hopelessness because in it, I found determination I never knew existed. Those are such inspiring words. And if you don't mind, can you please share what you are up to now? What you've transformed your life from, after the incident to now, your career path, all of that.
So after the injury and stuff, I lost my job and my home and everything because I was at that time, I was an insurance agent for American Income Life, and I had to see clients in person. Well, obviously, my face was way too damaged, so I lost my job where I couldn't do that. And so I went through this period where I was like, well, I'm gonna have to do something. So I went to telesales and insurance, started working for a company that literally where I went from working on my own to like being micromanaged every single hour of every single day, which was soul crushing. But
Mm,
at the end of that, within a year, I applied for, because it's been 2 years now, but a year later, I applied for a job and got a district sales manager job with American Republic. So I, had the salary, uncapped commissions. I had an entire team. I was getting overrides on,
Okay.
all that stuff. And as things became unfavorable within the company, I decided like this was not my stepping stone. This was a stepping stone. This is not my last final destination. So
Right.
I started applying for other jobs, and then I actually landed the digital ad sales manager and marketing executive job for one of the largest business magazines in the world. So
Woo!
um,
I'm
I
so
get to
happy for
travel,
you.
and I've published a book since then. I've done a lot of like online stuff like this, trying to help other people, mostly just like helping people thrive through their trauma, because that's really what it's about. It's not letting our experiences define us, but deciding our definitions ourselves,
Yeah.
um, which is the ultimate goal for me. Like, even above my job, above all the accomplishments I've made and everything that I've done, that is most important to me.
And is that why you agreed so graciously to be on my podcast?
Yeah, because I mean, like, I think we experience darkness in our life so we can reach out and pull other people out of it. And I think that and on top of that, like, it gives no matter how much money we make or anything like that, nothing is going to be as valuable to us as those connections.
Right.
And I know what it was like feeling that lonely in those times, because nobody in my family ever went through anything like that. I mean, most people haven't. So, like, feeling like nobody really got me, like nobody would ever understand everything I was going through. But helping others heal also helped heal me. And I think we need to do that. I think for the world to change and things to be better, that we have to show our best selves.
Right.
And that isn't through selfishness. That's not through, like, just focusing on us. Because, like I said, all the money in the world will never make happiness. You look at all these blogs and these excerpts and these news articles from people that's won the lottery, and you think, why are you so unhappy? And some of them kill themselves
Yes.
because there's nothing, like, there's no value. You can only buy so much stuff, but what you can't replace with money is those connections and making a positive impact, because it makes you will never feel more worthy than when you are showing other people their worth.
Yeah. It's definitely true. It's really true. And I want to thank you once again for sharing such an intimate part of your life with us and being so brave. Someone in the comments said that, it takes a lot of bravery to share your story the way that you did, and with such transparency. And I want to say thank you, Val. You've given me so much time of your day. I really appreciate it. Are there any parting words that you wanted to share with the people who are watching, or maybe going through something similar, or are starting to see, strange patterns developing in their relationship?
I think the one thing I would say the most is, like, that's pretty much how I ended one of those. Like, there's nothing you can experience in this life and nothing that you can lose in this life that you can't gain back more. No matter what has happened to you, no matter what your trials, your adversities, your traumas, or even limitations. Like I said, my head injury, that's not counting that my neck is in reversed curve. I got so much neck damage that I have permanent neck damage. So,
Oh my
like,
God.
no matter what your trials that you're going through and your difficulties and stuff, they don't define who you are. You can decide and become and grow into something greater than you ever dreamed possible. And if anybody, like, you need to surround yourself with people that also believe in you the way you should believe in yourself. Because maybe it's gonna take that before you actually feel it. That you are capable of literally anything.
Yep.
We are made of stars, and if that tells you we can't become anything we want to be, I don't know what else will. We are literally
Oh,
made of stars.
that's beautiful. I love that. Flower says, Val, you are strong just for sharing your journey. Yes, exactly. Pieces says, I had to
Thank you all.
lose. Sorry?
I said thank you all for that.
Oh, yeah. I love that. It's really beautiful that everyone's, coming together and recognizing your strength. And Pieces says, I had to lose all my friends who didn't believe in me. And you're better off that way. I think Value made a really important point that when you're at your lowest, you don't always see yourself with the beauty that you should. And so that's when it's even more important to surround yourself with people who do see that beauty and can lift you up and encourage you to be kinder to yourself. You know, when we usually don't treat ourselves with as much kindness as we should.
That's why I'd normally tell people, like, if it was somebody you loved, if it was your child, your cousin, your sister, I don't care who it was, and they were going through the same thing, what would you tell them?
That's a good one. We're definitely kinder there.
Yeah. We're like, we can keep going. We're super.
Yeah.
We have to be perfect.
Exactly.
But you're okay. You can go rest if you need to.
Exactly. It's crazy how different it is. I'm definitely, that's something. It's mind blowing how difficult it is to be kind to yourself and give yourself the breaks. I actually recently took a break from streaming for like a week or so because I just couldn't do it. I didn't have the mental capacity. I just got some really bad news in my life and I just didn't know how to cope, how to deal. And before, I remember being a little bit like, no, I'll push through. But this time I actually took the break, and I actually took a break, and I thought, wow, I haven't really taken a break for myself in a really long time, like a proper break where I didn't fill it with a whole bunch of activities to further my career and my life. And it felt nice to just vegetate, literally sit on the couch, curl up in a blanket, cry when I want, watch bad TV. And it was great. It was wonderful.
And then that wears off, and then you get back into the, I haven't been productive enough. You know, like, that's what we do to ourselves.
Yep.
Instead of being like, hey, you should have just enjoyed that. We'll start tomorrow. Yes. You know, we're going to hit it again tomorrow.
And that's what I mean. Like, this was the first time where I actually didn't beat myself up over it. And I was actually like, you know what? I'm going to take 2 days on the couch, and it's okay. And it was lovely. And I think I mentioned this on my stream the other day, that if you are able to, definitely take those days for yourself, because they are a huge recharge for your brain, and we all really need it. We all really need it. Yep. Yeah, we all need moments like that. Exactly.
It's okay if we sit in a corner and sulk and eat like a pound of ice cream occasionally. We need to.
Yes, exactly. Preston says, listening to your journey makes me want to go after my abuser. Yeah, no problem. After my abuser. What do you say for people like that, who after the abuse they want to like pursue some kind of action?
Honestly, the first thing I ask people, and this is the thing, like, are you doing it for the right reasons? Is it to protect other people? You know, is it to protect yourself? Is it for your own healing journey? As long as it is coming from a place that is healing for you, then I would say do it. But you also have to, depending on the time frame, there's also a statute of limitations, and you have to be aware of those based on state, because certain things, like they have a 5-year statute of limitations that if you don't press charges before then, you can't do anything. So you definitely want to like check into your area on that. But just make sure that, and this goes with any choice that you're making, make sure that you're doing it for the right reasons. It's like being kind to somebody. If we're just doing it for the recognition so somebody believes we're kind, then we're doing it for the wrong reasons.
Exactly. And eventually that comes out. Eventually that inauthenticity comes out. So Preston, I hope that whatever you do decide, it's for it is part of your healing journey, and you do it for the right reasons. And I'm really sorry that you went through whatever abuse that you did go through.
Me too. Yeah. But you're not alone, you know? At the end of the day, you're not alone. Yeah.
Unfortunately, as we could tell by the statistics of just the reported numbers, it's very, very common. Very common. Do you have anything else to say to close off before we head off, Val?
I am a big advocate for therapy. So even if you feel rounded, if you feel like a balanced human being, and you don't have anxiety, you don't really a depressed person, nothing like that, I still recommend it. And something I've learned along the way through life and everything is that the reason 99% of depression is a result of feeling stuck. We do not feel like we're moving
Mm.
forward in some area of our life. That's why we get depressed. And our anxiety is created because we feel like we can't control something. So I've learned during time that when we have an anxiety attack, I don't care if it's because of hypochondria, or if it's because of, let's say you're scared of um, storms or whatever, and there happens to be a lightning storm coming in,
Mm-hmm.
focus on what you can control.
Yes.
Like, focus on the part of it that you can control, because if you can do that, you can control your own anxiety. And I've learned that along the way, having a panic attack and stuff, that if I can focus on what I control, like if it's hypochondria, I can focus on the fact that I can eat healthy, I can go on a run, I can do exercises, I can do yoga, I can focus on my mental state. And if I focus directly on that, then the anxiety takes care of itself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if you focus on what you can control about it, like I cannot control facing John unless I just didn't want to press charges, which was not an option because he would, the results would have been catastrophic. However, focus on what I could control. I could say my piece to him. I could walk away from there knowing I did everything I was supposed to have done, and I can go on with my life and focus on building it the way I want it to.
Right.
And that helps anxiety, dissipate. Like, he has no control over it. I do. So that's the thing. Like, if you are having depression, focus on something you can move forward. I don't care if it's eating healthy. I don't care. Because once you start getting that momentum, you start, revamping your resume, whatever. Once you start getting that momentum, it's going to build on itself.
Yes.
And the same thing with anxiety. Focus on what you can control, because you are more powerful than you believe you are.
Yes. I love that. I love that. Yes. Flower says, my therapist says something similar. She's like, try to do something you already know. Don't start a new activity or unknown activity. Yeah, that's a great piece of advice. Thank you all for joining in for this talk. And thank you, Valerie, for your time and your candidness. It was a pleasure getting to know you more and actually properly talking to you. We've been talking for a few months now. So this has been really lovely. I'm really glad we finally did this. Thank you so much, Val, once again.
Thank you all for having me, and everybody that watched. I hope you guys share Raven's video because she's fantastic. And that way we can get the word out too, because everybody needs the little bit of understanding and knowing that, they're not alone.
Yes.
No matter what life throws at it. It doesn't matter if it's domestic violence. It doesn't matter if it's death or whatever. We all suffer in some way, and letting other people know that we have control over our suffering.
Yes.
The length of it, we have control of.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Thank you, Val, for that. Guys, I'm just going to head off to talk to Val offline for a couple of minutes just to say bye to her properly. And then I will be back to say goodbye to all of you. Thank you all for joining. I'll see you guys in a couple of minutes. Please help me say goodbye to Val. Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.